Hello guys and welcome back to the Summer Day Studios YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at another thing in Hypershade, which I think is really important and can help improve your materials massively. That is combining two different materials, and you can do that for different reasons. One of the reasons we're going to be looking at today is to add moss to this little acorn house that I've been working on for a separate video. You can also use it for dirt. You can use it for so many other different things, but I'm going to show you today at least how to use it for moss, and then you can go ahead and use that for all kinds of different purposes. So I have this nice kind of like woody texture here on the body of the acorn, but what I would like to have is have some moss coming out from the bottom here where it meets the ground, because that kind of makes sense, right? You're going to have this kind of mossy dirtiness where it meets, otherwise it might look a bit off. And probably some coming from the top here as well. So we're going to look at how we can do that. And obviously we're not hand painting this. If we were going to be painting this in something like Substance or 3D Coat, the idea of doing that is a lot simpler, but we're in Maya just using the Hypershade editor and Arnold materials, so we need to have a few other tricks to do this. So I'm going to stop the render for the time being, and I'm going to open up the Hypershade editor. And what you'll probably remember from if you've watched the other episodes is that we put together a basic material like this. So I have the acorn shader here. This has specular roughness, it has base color, and it has a normal map. We also have a displacement map in here as well, and we covered those in an earlier video. But please let me know if you have any questions at all as well in the comments about this. And I've already prepared a moss shader as well. And this is set up exactly the same way as we did a material in the earlier videos. Again, we have a normal map, a base color, and a roughness as well. But how do we go ahead and actually combine these two together in a way that will achieve the look that we want? So what we'll do is we're going to pipe both of these materials into a new material. We're going to go ahead and type in aiMixShader. Okay, and that's just this little node here, but it's actually really powerful. You can see we have two separate inputs. We have shader 1 and shader 2, and there's also a mix input here, but we'll get to that in a second. So what I'm going to do right off the bat is I'm going to plug the out color of our acorn shader here into shader 1. Okay, I like to use shader 1 as the sort of base material, right? So whether you're doing a metal or a wood or a brick or something, in my case, this kind of woody acorn shader, I put that into shader 1 as that's the main shader. Okay, and then the dirt shader, or in our case, the moss shader here, I'm going to plug the out color of that into shader 2. Okay. And now if I go ahead and render this, we'll take a look at what this looks like. You can see nothing has actually changed. Well, the reason for that is because what we need to do is we actually need to assign this mix shader here to the acorn, not just the acorn shader, right? We need to apply this mix shader. So I'm going to select the model, go to assign material, and we're going to look for that new mix shader here. And you can see what that's done is it's kind of just darkened it, and we're kind of getting a bit of a blend between the two different materials. You can see some of the mossy material coming from here, and you can see the wood. Now we could just leave that there if we wanted just a kind of basic blend between the two, and even if we were to select the mix shader here, you can see we have mix weight, which by default is at 0.5 or 50%, right? I could put this all the way to 1, and it would be all kind of this mossy material, all the way to 0, and it would be all woody. But we'll leave it at 0.5. But the true kind of magic of this material here comes into play when you plug something into the mix, like I mentioned earlier. And how do we get the moss to come from the top and the bottom? Well, we can use a ramp. Okay, just type in ramp and go to use ramp texture. Now you can see here, this is essentially just a gradient from black to white. And we can control that. And if you remember from the earlier videos on the Hypershade editor and materials, you'll know that black and white information can be used quite powerfully to control things like roughness and displacement, right? This information, these zeros and ones, can be interpreted by our materials to do something quite amazing. So we're going to go ahead and take the out color red specifically, right? You could also just take the alpha, but I like to use the out color red and plug that into the mix. Okay, with that selected, we're then going to go ahead and look at our acorn. Okay. Right, so it doesn't look like much has changed, but if you go ahead and just select the white one here, this little ball, and then just drag that to the left. Okay, what you'll see is we're getting more and more of the moss on our material here. Okay, if I drag this back, we're getting it less and less. What if I drag the black one? Okay, you can see that kind of does not much of anything, right? It seems to just sort of disappear. But if we move these points in such a way, and we pay attention to what's going on in our model, you can see what starts to happen is we're getting the moss creep down from the top, but it's not affecting so much more of the rest of the acorn, right? So we're getting that effect that we wanted, this kind of dirt and this moss coming down from the bottom of this cap. And we can even fine tune this even further and get this to go really, you know, very, very specific. So you can see what's happening here is the black, right, is the moss, and the white, or the white is the moss, I guess, in this case, actually, and the black is the wood. Okay, because if I pull this back, you can see the moss just takes over. But the closer we push these together, the more of this sort of effect that we're getting, right? And you can make this less or more. And really, all you need to do now to adjust how much of your moss or your dirt you have in these particular areas is just adjust this gradient, okay? And the great thing is we can even add more points to this, right? Let's say we wanted the moss coming from the bottom too. We could go ahead and just click anywhere on the inside of this gradient. It's going to create a new point. By default, it will take the color of where you clicked. So in this case, black, but we know white is the moss. So we're going to go ahead and make this white. Okay. And you can see now if I start pulling this up, we're getting that moss at the bottom too. And this black one here now is essentially just controlling where the midpoint of this wood is. Okay. And you can really, really kind of fine tune this to your heart's content and make this look however you like. But you see in a very, 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 very short amount of time, we've made a much more interesting looking material simply just by piping in two different materials into a mix shader and then using this incredibly simple ramp gradient to drive where those are positioned. Okay, and I do this quite a lot now whenever I have like environment pieces. If I want something to be sitting in the world and make it look a bit more natural, you know, you're going to get dirt and stuff that kind of comes up from the base, right? And let's say it's sitting in some mossy terrain, you're probably going to get moss growing up here too. And we can go ahead and add this to the doors and anything else that we'd like as well in future. So yeah, that's just an incredibly simple way to combine two different materials. I hope that's been helpful. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to ask. Always happy to answer any questions. If you have any suggestions as well, those are amazing. I love to hear those, what you guys might want to learn next. Yeah, thank you very much for watching, and like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.